Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Dr. Bruce Oppenheimer. He's a professor emeritus at Vanderbilt University of Political Science. Nobody knows the Congress better than he does. Dr. Oppenheimer, this bill that the president's trying to, both these bills the president's trying to pass on infrastructure and other things that are in his agenda, they are sweeping both in terms of their skies and in policy that they look more like things that FDR tried to pass in the New Deal or Lyndon Johnson tried to pass in the Great Society. But both those presidents had majorities in the Congress to deliver those kind of bills. Joe Biden doesn't have those. Is he barking up the wrong tree? Is he punching above his weight? And if he gets this done, won't that be pretty remarkable?
These are big programs. These are big changes. And given the narrow majorities, you would think that it would be difficult to do. Sam Rayburn once observed that he didn't want majorities that were too big because when he had big majorities, everybody felt like they could go off the reservation. There was no, when your majorities are small, there are two things. One, they're made up of people who are from districts which are usually safe for your party. When your majorities are really big, you're winning districts that you normally shouldn't win and Senate seats that you normally shouldn't win. So the likelihood that those are reliable members for your party is increased. Nevertheless, you're dealing with very, very, very narrow majorities, but you have very, very, very cohesive parties.
A couple things we talked about before that may be added into this bipartisan bill that's coming in on budget reconciliation. We talked a little bit about doing something on immigration. There's also talk about doing something on voting rights. Does that bring into play the Senate parliamentarian? Now, most people had never even heard of the Senate parliamentarian until we had a ruling earlier in the year on the American Rescue Plan that said you can't do anything about the minimum wage there. Are both the things that efforts try to do to add in things for immigration and voting rights subject to perhaps being ousted again by the parliamentarian because it's outside the rules?
Potentially. It's very tricky because, and again, if I went into detail, you'd need to bring your weed eater out. But essentially what you have to do is in the budget resolution, which precedes this big reconciliation bill, is figure in something which forces, because of financial considerations, to direct changes in existing authorizations in existing law. And that's difficult to do with some of these areas. How would you change the authority, for example, of the Justice Department in a way that it would affect the budget and therefore could have effects over immigration policy? Democrats
are using budget reconciliation because they can do things that they can't do because of the filibuster rules in the Senate, which requires 60 votes for a bill to even be considered. Democrats are now looking to change or modify that. They don't seem to have the votes even within their own party about that. A couple of senators, Manchin and Sinema, basically say that they want to keep the filibuster because it helps keep people involved, looking for bipartisan solutions, not partisan solutions. So is the effort to try to kill the filibuster dead at this point?
I think that what you're seeing is the Democrats using that as a potential threat and using it as a threat so that if Republicans use the filibuster, or the threat to filibuster is really what's being used, again and again and again on pieces of legislation during this Congress, which have broader public support, that the Democrats will then legitimize efforts to change the filibuster rule. And the Republicans are in a position where they, in some cases, may have to vote for cloture on things so that they undercut the legitimacy of the Democrats trying to do that.
President Biden has a long time history in the Senate, but he has sort of held back on saying where he thought the filibuster ought to be further modified. This week he pretty much said he doesn't want to see the filibuster ended because he said it would create chaos in the Senate. Right. So does that further take this off the table? The filibuster used to be a lot more intrusive and pervasive in the Senate than it was now. It used to be you had to stay on the floor the whole time the filibuster was going on. Is there a likelihood if they don't end the filibuster, Democrats might eventually agree to do some more modifications in it to make it more difficult, or select topics would be exempt?
Right. So there are some things, for example, with the voting rights area, there's some argument that they should preclude things which are protections under the Constitution from filibusters. It strikes me that there are efforts to make people speak on the floor and not just threaten to filibuster. There are also efforts to change the rule in a way saying that the minority has to produce 41 against rather than the majority producing 60 to end a filibuster, and therefore put the onus on the minority or on those opposing cloture to keep its members on the floor.
Another cloud on the horizon of all of this is the country is once again coming close to being able to start defaulting on its debts. The debt ceiling limit needs to be raised, or at least the spending limit. The Republicans say they're not going to contribute any votes to that at all. So again, the Democrats have to be united to get that done. Is this going to sort of put a monkey wrench into all the other things that are going on up on the Hill?
It's just another thing that will potentially put in delay for other pieces of legislation which might be dealt with. In the end, there will be an increase in the debt ceiling. How it comes about is always negotiations. It gets the stock market worried, it gets people worried, it gets journalists and media people writing about it. But we always manage to increase the debt ceiling.
Now, the potential cloud on the horizon more for the president is the COVID-19 cases. The president's gotten high marks for what he's done since he's been in office with handling the virus and the rollout of the vaccine, but now the vaccinations are plateauing out, stalling out. There's a new Delta variant out there, and numbers are going up. Is the president sort of losing control, at least making this a positive thing for his re-election, or at least for the 2022 elections?
I think you have to wait and see where the blame comes for this latest increase. What we're seeing right now is some Republicans and some conservatives who have been silent about vaccination starting to get on board, and we're starting to see some movement with the expansion of the effect of the Delta virus in rural areas and in politically red states of people getting vaccinated again.
Dr. Bruce Oppenheimer is our guest. He's a political science emeritus at Vanderbilt University. We're talking about a very busy summer in Washington. It's unusual for Congress to be this busy in the summer. Back to continue our conversation after you watch these messages.